Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Next Gen Enterprise Webinar Strategies for Engagement and Growth. I hope that everyone has, recovered on their socials from yesterday's big Taylor and Travis engagement announcement. Huge news, but, back to business. So just to go over a few housekeeping items, we are all in Cvent webinar right now, our webinar platform, and I really want you guys to go and join the chat on the right side of your screen. If you do have questions throughout today's webinar, you can submit them in the Q&A. And of course, you can download the deck or any other documents that we have listed for you there. And yes, this presentation is recorded. So I'm Emily Dick. I'm the Director of Demand Gen at Cvent, and I have, a pretty awesome job. I actually get to run the global webinar channel for Cvent, and we put on over 100 webinars a year. And that's, a huge job, and I love it. And I'm so passionate to be here speaking today with you all about webinars. And joining me is Michael Weber. Now, he is such an incredibly infamous webinar speaker at Cvent that there was a time where we actually nicknamed a webinar series after him, something like Webinars.
Yeah, I think it's a fortunate misfortune of my last name that kind of puts me in that same category. So I think I've finally lived up to my destiny at some level. But really happy to be here, Emily, and I can't wait to hear your perspective as really kind of the foremost authority within our company on exactly how to run a really successful webinar program. So thanks so much for having me, and looking forward to hearing what we're going to bring forward. So this is great.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right. So I want to just get into why webinars still matter. I mean, you guys are all here. You know why it's important. You're on a webinar. It's a little meta, but the reality is 58% of marketers are using webinars simply as a promotion tool today. 2/3 of B2B companies hosted webinars in the past year. And to me, the big stat here is that over half of marketers run 50+ webinars each year. So webinars remain a powerhouse for marketers. Over half of B2B marketers are saying that webinars deliver some of the best results for the organization. And it's kind of easy to see why. They're cost effective, they're scalable, they're versatile, and they support your full funnel, no matter what type of webinar or type of engagement you need to put on, whether it's thought leadership or some training. All those pieces drive engagement. So I'm not sure how many webinars you're putting on in a year as part of your program, but if you want to put it in the chat so I can have a quick peek, I'd really appreciate seeing some, engagement there. So today we're going to be reviewing 6 major themes for next generation webinar programs. And the goal of today's webinar is to give you relevant and actionable takeaways so that you can implement them into your next generation webinar program. Okay, I'm seeing like 12 monthly, that's a lot. 20 webinars, 10, 15, those are good volumes of webinars. So even if that's something that you're taking now and trying to grow, a lot of this stuff is going to be super relevant. So again, my goal today is to give you at least one thing that you can implement starting tomorrow. So the themes that we're going to cover today are making it personal and getting attendees to talk, putting all of your data to work, spending time to spotlight what matters, zeroing in fast on the data that you're getting out of your webinars, and then we can't have a webinar without talking about AI. So we'll end on that note. So let's start with making it personal. The era of one-size-fits-all webinars is over. Personalization is now table stakes for driving registrations and engagement. And I'm going to kick off today's webinar by, telling you guys a little story. So Greg, who's on my team, he actually when he was reviewing all of our Q2 webinar programs, he came up with a bunch of insights. And one of the insights that he was sharing with me and others was that adding a personal story into your webinars makes them better. Whether that was more engagement that you received, overall sentiment, more surveys, more, folks raising their hand to, take the next step, whatever it was. So obviously I have to start with a personal story, and I'm going to show you guys a video in just a moment here. I'm going to set it up. A couple years ago, I was presenting on a webinar, and unfortunately that day, daycare had a bit of a flood. And so I couldn't drop my youngest off at daycare on the day of the webinar. So, of course, I was like, all right, I'll get them all set up with, TV and a tablet or whatever. And then I'll be able to, present on my webinar. Well, that lasted all of 20 minutes before Leo decided to make a guest appearance. Take a look. Marketers. That's Leo. Okay, everyone said hi. Thank you. Ton of value as a digital first thing.
Why does it orange say live it soon?
Okay, you can go eat that. Need to register. Oh, go put that back in the fridge.
No, I want cereal. I already did something.
Okay, in a minute. To register, or you're announcing keynote and you want them to learn more. That's really critical. And I even got some top tips here on. Yes. Cereal's good. Anyways, so what's trending and what can help you? What's the future of event and brand marketing? And I'll start with the critical step.
My cereal.
Yeah, 5 minutes. On a phone, meant for Instagram stories. I'm assuming it could be used for TikTok. We haven't quite dabbled there yet, but that's the type of video style that it was. And it's all from videos like this one that, again, low tech, but we just add in a little bit of extra. And of course, there's captions. This link here to this video that we did for our flagship conference, Cvent Connect. You guys check it out and let me know. All right, Tiffany, how are you seeing the future of events and brand marketing? All right. So, that was, Leo, I think it was like 2 years ago. So Leo was about 5 in that one. School starts next week. So both of my kids are still home. We're hoping for no interruptions today. But I will tell you guys that the end of yesterday's, when we were doing our dry run, our practice of today's webinar, he made an end of webinar appearance because he got hungry. So fingers crossed, he's had his breakfast. We're on the Pacific Coast, so he just had his breakfast, and he's filled up enough not to join us today, but you never know. All right, let's get back to making things personal. So hopefully that helped you guys. And I wanted to now talk about like segmented promotion, because that's a really, really, really key part of making things personalized. And one of the things that is really important that I'm going to talk now about is you got to start with your tactics. Email is still the #1 channel, but no one wants to receive the exact same message. And a lot of times we're still using demographics. And this example really speaks to me. This is, you might have seen this one on LinkedIn before, but it really talks about if we just use demographics, well, same demographics apply to both these people. Obviously, very, very, very different folks that you're looking at. So I want everyone to start thinking about personas over just simple demographics and trying to use that to get your personalized experience. So RIP to Ozzy, and thanks for making an appearance on our webinar today for our personas. The next piece that's really key to your personalization is content relevance. So before launching any webinar, we have really come down to asking, what's the goal? Who's the audience? Where does it fit into this journey? And this really ensures that every session is tailored to deliver value and not just fill a calendar slot. We are even at the point of saying maybe this exact topic that you're wanting to speak about is better suited for a blog or a podcast. What we found was we were starting with our channels, number 4 here in this graphic, instead of starting at the middle section, targeting, and in particular, spending the time with your ICP. So my pro tip is start with your ideal customer profile and not filling the calendar slot for your webinar schedule that you might have. So get in that best practice. And believe me, even here at Cvent, that has been a journey. We used to be in the mechanism of doing 2 kind of large thought leadership webinars every single month until we came to we spent a lot of time with goals. We spent a lot of time with planning, going to our ICP, and we realized we don't need to do 2 a month. We can do 1. And that has made all the difference for our ability to scale our programs with more personalized webinars. Like today, where we're putting on a webinar specifically about webinar best practices. Okay, so I wanted to do a little bit of an interactive example here with everyone today. So there's one thing I know about the audience that's here. So you probably like a good meme. So I thought I would kick that off. I saw this one on LinkedIn recently, had to save it, share with my team. I got a canceled meeting for 6 o'clock this morning. So that was wonderful. Saved me a little bit of extra time. And of course, we have to pay homage to the Taylor and Travis news already circulating all over, and I'm sure about to take over our LinkedIns as well as our Instagrams. But there's another thing I know about this audience. It's that you guys are really busy. You are busy doing, juggling a lot of things, wearing a lot of hats, and often doing more than one role. So I thought we could do a quick poll. And then as a token of appreciation for doing this poll, to describe your professional style, whether you're a productivity pro, a learning leader, a team connector, a values warrior, I'm going to send you a little thank you gift after today's webinar based on your poll results, just to say thank you again for spending 30, 45 minutes with us here today. Now, this definitely leads me into my next big theme, which is get attendees talking. So as you guys are filling out that poll, which I hope launched, wonderful, excellent. So fill that out. But this is part of getting your attendees talking, using those different live engagement features and sparking real interaction and real connection. So what is important about live engagement? Well, to me, it's the secret sauce for memorable webinars. And I will tell you right now that we don't host every single webinar live. It's not always possible, but we really, really strive to host live as much as possible. And the reason is it gives us the maximum impact. We have better results overall across every single metric when we host live. And this is because it allows us to interact directly with our audience. And it just kind of shows that we're more responsive and not just broadcasting. Because again, I also help with our video channel, and videos are that static thing that you can do at a large scale as well. So you can have those as separate things. The other piece that I think is really important is the dynamic content aspect. So if you can get people talking, or you can run a different poll or ask different questions, you can actually shift where your content direction or talk track is going based on those responses. Had I had everyone tell me that they do 300 webinars a year, maybe I might have shifted some of my talk track at that point. But it's just something depending on your type of speaker that you have, you can use that engagement step to dictate the discussion. And then the next one I'll say is immediate next steps. Don't wait until after the webinar to engage. Communicate the next step during the webinar. Now, whether that's asking for a follow-up meeting, again, depending on the goal of the webinar, getting someone to download a resource, or even register for the next event. Do that right away during the webinar because you're more likely to stay top of mind. Now, going back to Greg, who you can actually see in this screenshot here, who's producing the webinar, he again was telling me some more tips. You know, he was saying that if you get, if you go back to what our best webinars are, it's that when our presenters are actually engaging or interacting with our audience every 5 minutes, which is a lot. I know, a big deal, but here's our pro tip. If you engage with your audience every 5 minutes, your results, again, this is overall results, will increase. So sentiment, follow-up surveys, if you have some kind of scoring going on during your webinar, and general interactions that are happening with your audience. So every 5 minutes. So thought I would throw in kind of a quick mid-webinar question as we're partway through the webinar. Have you so far learned anything that you could implement into your program tomorrow? And it's okay if you haven't. There's still lots of webinar left. But I want to hear from you guys. I'm going to pass the next section off to Mike Weber so that I can check the chat and see what's going on, see if you guys, what you've learned so far.
Thank you, Emily. And glad to be back with you all. The interactions so far have been incredible. So keep the chat firing, drop in your questions, upvote those questions that you want to get answered, and we'll make sure that we answer all those at the end of them. So keep them coming. I want to first spotlight what matters, right? Before I jump into this, the first thing that I want to spotlight is that Leo is the absolute star. I'm lobbying hard to actually have him show up in a little while, but I love that video. I think for anybody who has been working from home with kids, that's not the first time you've seen something like that, and it's most likely happened to you before. So makes total sense. But love that, and thanks so much for sharing that, Emily. But ultimately, the things that you want to avoid are a cookie cutter approach, right? Hopefully, what you've seen today is that we're having a little bit of fun with the format. We're trying to bring ourselves to it. And we're ultimately bringing something that is not status quo. What I can promise you is that if you're running a status quo webinar program, think like webinar, kind of mundane, PowerPoint presentations, mundane speakers, you're going to get status quo results, low engagement, non-actionable data, and ultimately a program that's probably not worth the squeeze. Right. So if we run to the next slide here, if you change some of that, you can expect to get better than status quo results. One of the best ways to do that is to tell stories. And in fact, I think customer stories are one of the greatest impacts. So I want to first, this is a series, by the way, this Webolution that we're taking you on. And so I want to shamelessly plug the next one. But our next webinar in the series coming up is going to be an exploration of just that, one of our customers. Veronica Seaman from Mass Mutual is going to be walking us through her experience and the way in which Mass Mutual runs their program. So it's going to be a great opportunity for you to dive into how some of your peers are or are not the same, different, up against the same challenges that you are. But I've also worked with another customer who was struggling to get engagement. And so what we did is we spent some time with some of our SMEs, sat down with them, and really took a look at a bunch of different things. From a technology perspective, they were using all the right stuff. They had engagement, functions. They were prompting questions, doing all of the stuff that Emily's walked you through up to this point. But what they were missing was that level of personalization and experience by driving customer-based stories into their presentations. They changed that. They've seen significant improvement in engagement and are driving better actions into their program. So ask yourself, in the spirit of asking questions, ask yourself, what could we do to help bring out better examples through customer stories into our processes? Next thing that I'm going to walk you through is how to put your data to work, right? Now, the beauty of running a digital first program like a webinar as one of your tactics in your larger event channel is that you can create a digital footprint on everything that you do. Whether that's starting with registration and sign up, all of that data can be collected, or moving into custom questions and consent, or attendee SSO, or spinning up UTM tracking, which helps you keep the pulse on all of that, right? All of it is digital, and all of that data is collected and there at your fingertips. Generally, what we find is that a lot of folks do a great job of collecting it. They don't do a great job of doing something with it. So on the next slide here, I'll walk you through, how you can ultimately connect that to your back-end systems, right? So whether it's attendance tracking, registrations, all of that information can easily and readily be connected back to CRM, marketing automation, for easy centralized reporting, as well as you'll see in a couple of moments here, a deeper understanding of how your program is operating, what's effective, how efficient are we being, and ultimately driving into how we can zero in fast on the highest level of engagement here. We drop into the next slide. We want to make sure that you're zeroing in fast on your highest intent signals coming out of each one of your webinars. So again, as I mentioned, to dive a little bit more deeply, the data in starts with registrations, attendance, surveys, duration, Q&A, polls. By the way, we're collecting all that information right now. Drive that into Cvent, and then ultimately on its path into your primary business systems of record. So that's great, but that's only part of the battle, right? Now it's about, what do you do with it? How do we make that data work for you? And that's to drive into next best action, right? So what does that mean? That means that folks who are doing different things in each one of your webinars, they're creating a story about who they are. They're voting with their mouse, with their keyboard, with their time, with their energy, with their effort. So some of that should be driven into sales if you're getting really high intent signals, marketing, customer success, community, RevOps, a whole bunch of different things. Part of the process that we work with our best customers on is to define exactly what that looks like. We'll sit down, understand exactly what their objectives and goals are, and help them map out what that next best action process should be. Ultimately, a couple of top tips for you. It needs to be instantaneous, right? Time kills all energy and effort. You think about a stack of papers on a desk. When somebody attends a webinar or interacts with your brand in some way, you're at the top of the pile. The more time that evaporates between that moment and your follow-up, you move down the pile. The worst place to be is at the bottom of the pile. Things creep in. So taking that next step is really the key thing here, right? I'm going to now pass back to Emily, who's going to take us home, talk a little bit about how artificial intelligence can really power up your program.
That's awesome. Speaking of next best action, I already have my Salesforce dashboard up, you guys, with today's information. I'm ready to segment you all and see what your next follow-up is going to be. So we are on top of that, and that is how critical it is for every interaction. So thanks for taking us through that.
That's why you're a pro, Emily.
Thank you. I want to close talking about AI, right? The future is AI. It's here. But I think everyone's actually using AI in some capacity. I'm seeing some questions actually come in already about AI. We're using, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, or your company approved tools, right? And here's an example. I was last week looking up just cliches to avoid not spending too much time on different things, not using, I see the word unlock everywhere, so I tried not to use that. But I want to spend, again, going back to, I want to give you guys really actionable stuff that you can implement. So I'm going to talk to you guys about two things in AI, but I'm going to start with my number one tip that I want everyone to do. I want you to begin doing this tomorrow. I want you to start using AI to get a summary from your webinar. Not just the top takeaways, those are important, but I want it to go a little bit deeper. I want it to tell a little bit of a story about what happened during that webinar. And this is definitely, I will tell you, the level of information that people are now expecting in that summary email. They want not just those bullet points, but a detailed report of what went on during that webinar. I'm already seeing this implemented in top industry events, which makes sense because at top industry events, you're putting a ton of effort for in-person events. There's lots of people on site. They want to capture all the goodness of the day. But now that the tools are here for us to do this for our webinars at scale, this is a no-brainer to start adding into your own program. So I like to keep things interactive. I want to give you guys real examples. So I'm going to take a real webinar. 2 weeks ago, we had one of our big thought leadership. It's called our marquee webinar for August. And I thought we would use it as a real live example to show everyone here how to do this. Okay, so here is my actual webinar. I went into the video. I'm able to download, but under subtitles, the actual transcript from this video. Now, if you don't have that ability in your webinar tool, there's other free options you can do to get transcribed, talk track from a video. So it's possible. Make sure it's recorded. I'm going to go into our own company approved tool. And now I put together a quick prompt that you guys can see here. I'll share in the chat or in the follow-up afterwards as well in case anyone wants to use this. I'm attaching the file so that I can ignore my desktop here, guys. But I'm attaching the file of the transcript. I've got the prompt, and then I'm going to ask the chat AI agent to now put together a summary, right? It's going to put together that comprehensive summary that I asked for. It takes about 10 minutes. Now, again, this is my own our own internal tool at Cvent called Glean, but I've got ChatGPT there as well if that's something you're permitted to use for your company as well. Now it's going over all the main topics covered. And this is, again, it's a lot more than just those simple bullet point takeaways that you normally get, right? This is a good amount of detail. Look at these key insights shared by the speakers. That alone looks like a great follow-up email to me. We've got actionable takeaways, all stuff that I think our attendees and no-shows would really appreciate. They're talking about some examples here. What was the overall purpose? And then at the very bottom, it actually talks about what was the engagement style? What was the tone? What went on with the speakers? What made it good or was it a miss? So I can not only use this as a follow-up for all of my attendees, all of my no-shows from my webinars. Everyone who registered is going to get some of this detail put into a nice email, of course. But I can share this now with all of our speakers. So Ryan and Avril, who presented on this, could take this, and that's going to save Greg, who produced this webinar, by the way. It's going to save him hours of time having to go through and do a follow-up email. He's now got this, at his fingertips to be able to give. So this is as I said, my number one takeaway. Everyone should be doing this. This should become best practice, and it's only a matter of time until it's, I think, embedded within the products itself. Of course, you're going to go and just edit a little bit for your own emails, but this is the type of stuff attendees are going to start expecting out of your webinars. So there you go. That's my number one tip for you all to start doing. But that's not everything that's going on in AI. So now I want to take you to a framework I'm working on. So I want to talk really quickly about where I'm taking AI in my own channel. And it really is to combine generative AI with workflows. So we have tons and tons of repeatable processes in our webinar program. Like I said, running over 100 webinars. I mean, I don't even know how many we have this week alone. But we have lots of repeatable processes and we have lots of stakeholders. And I want to streamline those workflows and get it feeling like easy and seamless, like a ChatGPT discussion, right? So that's where I want to get to. And it's not to say that I don't have folks using AI to create content. I absolutely do. These are examples from our Cvent approved AI tools. It's here. We have the ability to get some email content written. We have ability to work on different, scripts or abstracts or content, but it's bespoke. And some people have better prompts than others, and some people don't really like how cumbersome a form is. So having tools that come together with, marry the content generation with the appropriate workflows and approvals is my Webolution. And this is a real example of a template that I'm working towards where you can build out workflows for examples of a webinar promotion. Again, it's one set of inputs for an entire webinar, and here's where you can start, creating, if it makes sense for you to have emails, and maybe you also want some landing page copy or some social promotion suggestions as well. Built-in approvals for the right stakeholders that you put together, but suddenly I have one input. I can manage this all across all of my webinars that I'm putting on. So this is really incredible. Okay, I want to take you guys back really quickly to 2 years ago. It's the last time that I did a webinar on webinars. It's hard for me to present live on webinars because of my kids' drop-off schedule for school. So I'm happy to be here again today. But 2 years ago, I was able to present. And at that time, I kind of alluded to this earlier, we were having a little bit of trouble managing kind of our number of webinars and the planning process. And so what I was working on in 2023 was this framework by, a webinar type by goal and by benchmark. And so this was kind of the piece, and this is, again, table stakes as we call it today. But that was really where we came to in 2023, continuing to our evolution of this. Now, in 2024, we had a slightly different problem that we were trying to solve for. And that is we were trying to work towards getting, getting scale because we were trying to personalize more. So in this example, I'm showing all of our different webinar types that we do, and they're on a scale by production complexity and promotion complexity, two very different scales. And so it determines how much, whether they're a simple webinar or a complex webinar. And the size of these different bubbles is just the volume. So we put on lead generation as an example as our biggest volume driver of webinars, but something like product training is also pretty big, but it's not very complex. So we can do that at a fairly big scale. So this is my 2024 evolution. And as I mentioned, I'm currently in the process of working on the 2025. Whew, I said that too many times. This is my AI Webolution. So I'm hoping to get this framework built and put together, maybe share on LinkedIn or at the next session that I do, maybe even at Connect next year, our big flagship event, but really looking forward to getting this one built out and in practice for our webinar channel. I know we're seeing lots of questions come in. I think that's awesome. I want to get to the Q&A, but I can't do that until I discuss the key insights. And guess what? I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a secret here. As I mentioned, we did a dry run yesterday just to practice, get everything together. And I actually used the AI to come up with my key insights and actionable takeaways. So it made it a lot easier. Turns out my bullet points were kind of boring. So what were the key insights discussed today? Obviously, personalization is essential, super important. People expect it. You guys have already learned this, but storytelling, real life examples, put that in your webinars, absolutely critical. If you can, live engagement drives value. So if you can do the live webinar, I know it can be more work. I think there's some questions on it too, that we'll discuss in a minute. Super important. Then we've got data utilization. We have so much data coming from our webinars. Don't sleep on it. Make sure it's going to the right places so that you can build that action-oriented follow-up, which leads me to ask everyone here. So if you've seen enough so far that you are like, hey, I would like to learn more about Cvent, we have the ability for you guys to get a demo and a $100 gift card by clicking the CTA. So if you guys are interested, click the link and follow up on that. So that's my action-oriented follow-up tip for today. And then lastly, AI is a game changer. And then I'm going to put up one more screenshot for actionable takeaways for everyone here. You guys can screenshot this. I'll go through it really quick before we get to our Q&A. But the big one is start with your ICP, your ideal customer profile. I hope that my example kind of showed how starting with the channel was not the best way to move forward, when it created some problems and we weren't reaching our goals. And by flipping that script, we were able to do better webinars. We were able to do less webinars of like big complexity, and we were able to do more personalized webinars. We love utilizing our live features. Thank you guys for filling out the polls. I'm really excited to work on some thank you gifts for y'all. And then integrating your data is critical, because you do all this work. I know how much work it takes to put on a webinar. You don't want to miss that. So make sure it's integrated into the right places, whether that's your map or your CRM, and get following up on that. I have a personal rule of no lead left behind. So people need to at least have some place to land if they're not already being sent to sales or another appropriate follow-up. Please start using your AI generated summaries. I'll put something in the chat shortly about that one. And then finally, if you can, start thinking about how you can streamline workflows with AI. Message me on LinkedIn if you're already doing this. I'm so interested in getting this best practice framework built out for next gen webinar strategies. And with that, I think it's time to head into Q&A.
Before we get into Q&As, just a round of applause. Emily, Dick, absolutely crushed it. Thank you so much. That was incredible. We're going to drive into one of the first questions, and I'd love to get your perspective on this. So
Okay.
We'll just go with the top upvoted question as the first one. So beyond registration numbers, what are the top 2 to 3 KPIs that you'd recommend tracking for your program?
Okay, so I'm going to say that you guys saw that big bubble of different types of webinars, right? And lead generation was the biggest. So I'm going to start with the lead generation one, and some of the metrics that I particularly track that are really, really, really important to me. Look, attendance numbers are really important, but I also more often than not track a show rate percentage. That ends up being comparable webinar to webinar. And that's something that is incredibly important. So I have like in webinar stats that are important. I also will say if we have no engagement in a webinar, that is one of the first things that I'm going to be like, Greg, we got to go deep dive in this. What went on that we had no questions asked, no chat, no surveys filled out? Did something go wrong? Did we not have people? Like, was the sentiment of that webinar off? So those are my in-webinar benchmarks that I'm looking at, okay? So what went on so that I can tell if it was good or bad or needs improvement or whatever, if we have to go deep dive something. On the flip side, because lead generation is so important to some of the webinars that we put on, that is an example of the CTA that you guys saw where, we're asking people to raise their hand for a demo if they're interested. That has become a super critical one. Now, I will say we changed that CTA based on different types of webinars that we put on. And so you can start benchmarking just maybe CTA engagement, and that ends up being really important. Additionally, we've got down funnel. So again, those are like direct webinar metrics that we're tracking today. Then we also track, lead progression. We use a typical like marketing qualified lead, handoff to sales, and of course, attributed pipeline. Those are the next things that we're going to start tracking. We use Salesforce, so we're going to have all of that within Salesforce. As I mentioned, I already have the report built that shows me where everyone is in lead funnel from today's webinar, and we'll be tracking to see if we made any kind of uptick on lead funnel progression post-webinar. So those are our main ones.
It's great. We're going to jump into one from Aaron, which is, do you have any tips for making a pre-recorded webinar more interesting, enticing, engaging?
Yeah.
What do you think? I've got some thoughts. I want to hear from you first, and then I'll add in a couple of.
Okay, my like number one thing, and maybe you're already doing this, but my number one thing is don't be like slide overload, just a deck and a person in the corner style. That's so boring. So you need to make, if you're going to do a semi-live or a recorded version, you got to put the effort into that recording to make it interesting, because you're not having that direct engagement with the audience. So I would add different elements of production, add a video like I did today, or definitely, of course, have those stories in there. But I just think getting away from just like the presenter and the deck and making it more dimensional than that is really critical. What's your take, Mike?
No, I would agree with you. I think we talked about Greg Jackman earlier. I think, like, honestly, the strong relationship between content, speaker, and the producer is really what sets a great webinar, whether it's live or pre-recorded or simu-live, whatever the format is. That's really what sets a great, engaging, webinar apart from one that's not, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes what I've seen is that folks they lose sight of what the ultimate objective is. Right? The objective is to get folks to connect to whatever you're bringing forward, right? And if that's buried under, heavy duty content or a message that's not clear, that's that. I would add one more thing here too, which is chop it up, right? And so I chop up each webinar with some live engagement. That could be live question and answer right in the middle of it. If it's pre-recorded, certainly at the end of it also. But also pre-recorded content benefits from short snippet based stuff, right? So if you're thinking about running a pre-recorded 60-minute webinar, maybe you can make that 3 20-minute webinars or something like that to help drive in the benefit of time, but also more deeper engagement along the way. It's a great question, Erin. All right. So kind of in that same exact vein, how do you decide between a live webinar or an on-demand webinar, something pre-recorded? What are your thoughts there? Maybe we can give a little insight into why we decided to do this one live, but what are your thoughts on that?
That's a really great question. Okay. We have a couple factors that go into live. Now, I alluded to the fact that certain webinars, such as what we call our marquee, those get the most production support. And we are very fortunate, I will say. We have Greg producing these level of webinars. So we have a higher production. We do some in studio, things like that. So that's an element. If we have the production capabilities, I am always pushing for live because I want the engagement. We're putting the effort behind all the promotions. Once people are there, it's so critical to capitalize on the engagement that's happening back and forth. However, there are times when speaker availability becomes an issue. So we have two options when speaker availability becomes an issue, and that's to either do a whole recording, which sometimes we do, and then we kind of just have someone come on at the end who can make it live. So we call that a simu to live. So we might do that, or we might have them as, maybe it's a guest speaker, and we just have like a video section of them for 10 minutes or something like that. That could work. And so you kind of have this live and simu-live element or video element, if you will. So we've done actually both of those. So that's the piece that's really important to us. But I will say we run a lot of webinars that we actually run are kind of similar content. So if you will, we might run a weekly webinar on a certain topic for some of our business lines. The content doesn't change that much. So for an entire month, we might be able to use one recording for that webinar series, if you will. So we'll record it once at the beginning of August. We use it for all of August, and we have live Q&A and live chats. We have moderators, so they can answer any of those questions. So they're just a little bit more, it's more like joining, just like, I don't know how to say it, like maybe like a live, a training at a certain time or a demo at a certain time, but there's a little bit less back and forth engagement. So you just have to balance what your goals are with the actual ability to put on that webinar. Because I will tell you, when time zones come into play, we can't have, like, I can't run this webinar live in APAC, for instance, from like today's webinar. And the reason I was able to do it live today is simply because my kids are not in school. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the availability to be here. So that's where speaker availability comes in as well.
I'm still waiting for a Leo sighting. So
I don't know. I gave him a serious, like, stay.
I'm upset, but I'll get over it. But I want to add one more perspective on this too, and it's kind of just an insider tip for everybody, is that we pre-record all of our live webinars also, just in case something goes wrong day of, right? I think that's an important thing to remember, is that I think sometimes folks avoid live because they say, hey, you know what, we just can't risk it, right? And I get it, right? Sometimes that's just inevitable, and that's what's going to happen. But having that pre-recorded during the dry run, which we did yesterday, we were ready. If something didn't go right today, we could ship that pre-recorded content out to everybody. You send a little note, say, hey, we wanted to do this, but here's what happened, but here's all the content for you. Happy to pivot, make you move forward. All of this is really about, meeting your audience where they are and driving in the best possible solution for what you're trying to drive forward. So that's a key thing, and love your perspective on that, Emily.
That's a great point.
Good. Okay. So we're going to go to the next question. We got a couple more here, which is it realistic to use AI for things like audience segmentation or follow-up content, or is that still future state? I know you drove into some of the ways in which you're using follow-up, but what are your thoughts there? I'd love to hear some of the audience segmentation or personalization things that you think AI can help you.
I think it's coming, and it's going to depend on what platforms you use and how they talk to one another. Yeah. I was very fortunate to be on our own product roadmap yesterday, and I know this is top of mind for not just our own product team, but other product teams and technology teams, is how do you get that data talking so that you can be like, hey, I'm looking to do the promotion strategy for this group of people. Can you show me a list? I think that stuff is coming. I think it's still pretty future state. I've seen a couple examples coming through, maybe from like a bit from HubSpot, but it's still mostly future state. Keep an eye on it though. It's going to get easier. But for my perspective, I can still bake it into those, like when I'm talking about like my AI workflows that I'm building, those can still be built in there, even if it's like an offline step now. But it just depends. I think it's just how your data talks.
I see it in the future as being a kind of second layer for content retargeting and repurpose of content, right? Where you can essentially feed in a transcript, feed in the actual raw video, plus all the engagement, along with timestamps, and have AI really say, hey, you know what? This is what I see as the best bite-sized content for driving this kind of engagement or for use in this kind of a campaign or something like that, right? Where, maybe that's not automated and we just kind of ship that out to artificial intelligence to just run automatically, but as a confirmation of what we see as, go-to-market professionals as attractive content or as content that's going to take on another life in social media or on sales slicks or whatever it may be thereafter, right? But I agree with you, still future state, but the beauty of it is that we're in this kind of happy period where we can try things out, make mistakes, learn from them, and continue to drive value back into our audiences and for our stakeholders. So love to hear how you're already doing it and can't wait to see where it's going to go. So I think we got time for one or two more questions. If you've got more questions, make sure you drive them into the Q&A. But we're going to go to one here about how do you connect engagement metrics from webinars into your CRM without adding a ton of manual work. So I did talk about some of the integrations that are a part of that or that are available to you. I think that is really the key here is automation, right? So we'll just use Cvent, webinar as a tool set. We've got out-of-the-box integrations with things like Salesforce as an example, or HubSpot, or whatever your CRM of choice is. But depending on what your business systems of record look like, whether that's a data lake that sits on top of those tool sets, or you've got another layer like some sort of CDP or whatever it may be that's sitting on top of those things, we can connect into all of that. That's the real thing, though, is to make sure that you've got some sort of automated feed from all of the engagement data that you're collecting in your webinars and drive that in for next best action. If you've got a lot of manual lifting, human beings who are carrying water for you, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge to achieve scale, to achieve accuracy, and get to the timely follow-up that you're looking for, right? So everybody's a little bit different. You've got to sit down with your IT teams, the folks who are business system stakeholders, really understand that if you're not fully connected today. But it's a worthwhile investment of time, energy, effort, dollars in order to make that happen. What are your thoughts on that, Emily? And do you want to give a little bit of insight into how we're set up for that kind of success, how sales interacts with some of the content and data that your program drives out?
You did a great job of giving that overview. I'll give just like a quick little how I put it in action. And everyone's different. So for us, I do webinar to Marketo because that's where I do a lot of more intricate data. And then in my CRM Salesforce, I want like lead funnel. That's all I want in there. So we keep and of course the campaigns and attribution and all that good stuff. But I keep like activity data more in my marketing automation program. And the piece that's like really, really, really critical for me right now that I'm working on is taking certain attendee data that relates to like a product or a solution, so I can put people in the right lanes. Again, going back to that personalization, that next best step. So that's actually really critical. So the most time that I spend is putting I would say like more intricate data connections between my webinar and my map system. And then just more simplistic data I need in CRM so that I can benchmark and look at things comparatively and then track attribution. That's how I do it, and that's what's important. But yeah, everyone's a little different.
Love that. Okay, we've got keep the questions coming. We got plenty of time here, but I'm going to jump to one more question, which we've got, which is: does your webinar platform have the ability to suppress and include email lists, right? So Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe some of the ways in which you do some outreach or marketing based on different lists, or how you suppress different things or move some of that forward?
Sure. I almost like have I feel like I'd have to have a full follow-up conversation on this one exactly. Like absolutely, of course. Some of the things that are really important is, of course, we have certain subscription rules, and
Sure.
We're a global company. I do a myriad of different ways of promoting. Sometimes it's directly in Cvent, sometimes it's in Marketo, but of course those have to go hand in hand. So where we need to make sure we're compliant, we're pulling a list maybe from like a data lake or something like that, from depending on how complex it is, and it can talk to either system. So that I usually do suppression at that point, but we can add that that layer as well, depending on where I'm sending the promotions from. So was there something more specific? I think
the short answer is yes. From a suppression perspective and from a compliance perspective, Cvent can do all of those things that you're looking for, right? I think ultimately, again, everybody's setup's a little bit different. Cvent has those kinds of outreach and promotional tool sets that are available to you as just a part of the subscription, but you don't have to use Cvent for those things. If you're using Marketo or Marketing Cloud or Eloqua or any other marketing automation tool that's part of your front end promotion for a webinar or anything else within the larger macro channel, you can continue to do that, right? And all those rules will apply. So great question. I think we got time for maybe one more if there's any on there, but we're going to hang out here for a minute. But Are there any other questions from anybody else?
Is there anything in the chat that I might have missed?
I just scoped out. I don't see anything else.
All right. Well, it's still a very good interactive session today. So I appreciate all the extra engagement. I hope we're going to be sending out all of these tips and tricks and that everyone is walking away with, again, something they can start implementing tomorrow. And thanks for putting up with my memes, because PowerPoint's not my forte. So I end up just adding memes and talking to you. Yeah. And I want to thank Mike for coming on and joining and giving his great perspective. It's really, really fascinating to get just like a sales mind on here. He thinks of things a little differently than I do. And I think that's a wonderful perspective to have here. Yeah,
thank you. And Emily, it is clear why our programs are as successful as they are with you at the helm. And so thank you, for doing all the things that you do here, but also for sharing that perspective today with our audience. So thank you all. And thank you to the audience for all the great collaboration and participation in polls, chat, the incredible questions that we got. Don't forget about our CTA. I think there's some great stuff. Plus, Emily, I almost forgot. I want to know if I'm going to get one of those gifts. I didn't get. I don't know. Did you fill out the poll? Did you answer the poll? It's not available to speakers, but I'm going to have to send some moles in. I don't know. I might have some tricks up my sleeve. I might have some stuff at HQ that I can give away. So we'll see. Well, thank you again, and thank you all for joining today. And keep your eyes peeled for our next webinar coming in the series. Thank you, everyone.